Bomberman, known by the masses for its battle mode. Some argue Bomberman is only good for its battle mode, which I strongly disagree with. But it's undeniable Bomberman wouldn't be nearly as recognized as he is without it. But it wasn't always this way. The first few Bomberman games were single-player only, but fairly early on, a multiplayer mode was added to a Bomberman game. Which game exactly had it first depends a bit on your region, but going strictly by original Japanese release dates that we know about, the first Bomberman battle mode was on Bomber Boy for Game Boy, released August 31st, 1990. There is a slight chance it may have been beaten to the punch by another Bomberman sort of game, but more on that some other time. Whose idea it was to have a multiplayer versus mode for Bomberman, we don't know. There is near zero information on the development of this game. I mean, we have the credits, and that's just about it. For what it's worth, the planner and programmers, producers, and supervisor for this game had just come out of the development of Ys Book 1 and 2 on TurboGrafx, but only the planner programmers would go on to work on Bomberman games after this. Bomber Boy has 3 modes. It has a straight-up remake of the NES game. It has a more fleshed-out adventure where you liberate a bunch of robot people using an inventory system for the power-ups that wouldn't be seen again until Bomberman DS, and of course the Versus mode, requiring 2 consoles with cartridges and a link cable to play. Now, what are all the releases of this game, and are they cross-compatible? In case you don't know, Bomberman is a whole big mess of region stuff, localization shenanigans. I have this 8-9 hour tidbit on it, that's kind of my whole shtick, but looking just at this game, Bomber Boy was released in North America as Atomic Punk. There is no known reason for the name change, and in Europe as Dynablaster. I'll emphasize here again, as I have in the past, that the name change in Europe probably occurred because of terrorism, but there is no official source on this, so in reality we're in the dark on that one as well. Regardless, here I have Bomber Boy. Actually, the China-Hong Kong cartridge, though the ROM on it is identical to the Japanese ROM, or it should be. This one is a bit decayed, so there's a display error here. I actually dumped the ROM, and even in a questionable computer program, the image is still messed up. But this cartridge can be played with the North American Atomic Punk. They are cross-compatible. And both of them also work with Dynablaster. But these aren't the only releases of the game. Bomber Boy was included on the 1996 release Bomberman Collection on Game Boy, alongside Bomberman GB and GB2. That game came in this nifty tin box. No, I don't have it, only the cartridge. Trying it out, it is cross-compatible with all 3 previous versions we've had. And then, the Korean release of Bomberman Collection, Bomberman Selection for Game Boy Color. It omits GB2 and only has Bomber Boy and GB. One fun fact is that the story intro for GB that was omitted from the Western release Wario Blast, long story, was included here in GB within Bomberman Selection, and it is in English. So there is an official English localization for the GB intro cutscene. It has such great story text as, "But one day Black Bomberman's robbed, bomb kick, dash, tackle, line bomb, super bike, moto bomber, all skills had..." What the heck? Tangent aside, Bomberman Selection is really stingy about wanting to be played on a Game Boy Color. I mean, here I am playing it on a Game Boy Color, and it's complaining that it will only work on a Game Boy Color. Probably because I'm using, well, some questionable computer programs struggle with this one too, but others play it just fine. So I was able to test it, and indeed, it is cross-compatible with all other 4 releases. That out of the way, let's actually start this up. Our Versus Mode menu has white and black bombers, and yes, this is still the Wild West era of what exactly Bomberman is supposed to look like. Here's some artwork from the official guidebook. We can pick between Paddle Mode and Powerful Mode, and whoever presses Start first spawns in the top left. In the next menu, either player can determine how many wins you need to win the match. 1 to 5. We got our 1-2 switch, look 'em in the eye, and we begin. There's only this one stage, and the first player starts in the top left, with the other player starting in the bottom right. You may notice that both players are playing as White Bomber. Indeed, no matter which player you are, your character will be displayed as white and your opponent will be displayed as black. This is described in the European Dynablaster manual. Maybe it saves space to do things this way? The victory and lose animations are the same for each player. They don't have to be color swapped since it's always white winning or losing. The results screen always displays you as player 1 with your opponent as player 2 below you, which can certainly get confusing, but I'll be referring to the player initiating the battle and starting in the top left as player 1 to avoid confusion. The exception to the color swap per player is the Korean Bomberman Selection version on Game Boy Color. The match start animation still has white and black bombers, but then when you're on the field, player 1 is White Bomber with red shading, and player 2 is White Bomber with blue shading. This is the case on both screens. Then for the win and lose animations at the end of the match, your color carries over. Player 1 is red and sends a blue guy flying for the win animation, and vice versa. The draw animation is the same though. This also carries over if selection is played together with a black and white release, by the way, each game functioning the same as if it were connected to the same version. The music for the scoreboard is recycled from Thulia in Game Mode A/Bomber Boy, the main campaign, but the battle music itself? You might be expecting this tune here. You know, the one used for pretty much every Bomberman game in the 90s, composed by the quintessential Bomberman composer Jun Chikuma. I do regret not mentioning her in the big video. Well, that melody originated in the NES game as the music for the bonus stages, though Chikuma is uncredited for this one, and it appears in Bomber Boy's port of the NES game in the bonus stages, but again, Chikuma is uncredited. She would get her recognition later on, but most of the music in Bomber Boy was done by arguably the second most important Bomberman composer, Yasuhiko Fukuda, who did a ton of music here in the GB series, Supers 4 and 5, and Super Bomberman 2, meaning he's probably responsible for the Mr. BB melody that got a remix all the way in Super Bomberman R Online and Amazing Bomberman. The music for the battle mode here would never reappear or be iterated on, despite being the first. While not as cool as the traditional battle mode music established later, I do like the jazzy vibe. Our field is 15 by 15 squares, but the field of view is only 10 by 10 squares, so you never see the full map. Only other game that comes to mind that doesn't show you the full map in battle mode is Act 0 in FPB mode. Indeed, here the official guidebook tells you to place bombs out of your opponent's field of view to try and get him to run into it. This is a lie, by the way. A bomb's flame range can't get long enough to hit someone from outside their field of view. At max range, you can still see the bomb and stand in safety. I guess that's why they cropped the image in the demonstration here. The other tips aren't that useful either. Oh, did your opponent very unwisely place a bomb behind them, thus putting themselves in a dead end? Trap them in it. Even if they didn't, just place your bomb here at the end of this long straight and hope that your opponent is trapped from the other side so they can't get away. The game starts you off with some starting invincibility, so go on a short rampage if you feel like it. In panel mode, you start with 1 bomb, 1 fire, and can get up to 8 bomb, 4 fire, not enough to hit someone outside their field of view. By moving in a straight line, it seems you can place more bombs once your first one seemingly disappears from the side of the screen, but there's no real reason to. Taking your speed and the chain delay into account, the longest chain you can place, using only intersections, while still being able to get out of the way, is 5 bombs. Meanwhile, in powerful mode, you start with 4 bomb 4 range, and there are no power-ups. So you can actually get more powerful in panel mode with the higher max bomb stat. Soft blocks are still here in powerful mode, but without power-ups in them, all they do is clutter up the arena, and I guess create opportunities to trap the opponent in cubbyholes if they're not paying attention. If you were hoping for the traditional start off with a lot of power-ups in an open arena mode from later games, you will be disappointed here. There is one perspective we can have for this. Without kick or punch or Louis or shields or skulls or speed-ups or even a time limit with falling blocks, it is a balanced match with no real opportunity for fancy teching besides just basic Bomberman etiquette, like placing chains in intersections, standing in safety, and always making sure you have an escape route. This is Bomberman in its most basic form. Really, all you can do is hope that your opponent messes up really badly so you can trap them. Made a bit harder because you both have the same speed, and there are no speed-ups, so matches can really last forever. After a match, it's back to versus mode screen, and that's it. That's our first Bomberman battle mode. Really not much to it, but, well, that's also the first. There's not much tech to learn because the basic tech of Bomberman in its purest form is the tech to learn. Sure, Bakudan no Toko was 7 years old at this point, and Bomberman NES 4.5 to 5 years old, but actually playing with another person could certainly mess you up if you'd never done it before. An interesting artifact, but not something you'd play over and over again for hours in this form. What was the first Bomberman battle game you played? Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice day.